All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for the second installation of our Rayid conversation, Cycles and Seasons. What I'd like to do before I introduce Denny Johnson again, I want to just read from his book, What the Eye Reveals. On the back, you will see the 4 different types of iris constitutions, which he's going to talk about today. But this is a quote by Hester Lewis, an instructor in psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. She said, "The future will prove Rayid a leader in counseling techniques. Using it along with what we know of human behavior, we can more wholly problem solve and integrate questions on education, career and marital choices, and how to change personal, familial, or parental attitudes and behavior." And certainly in my practice in optometry, I've found that the use of Rayid iris has helped me shape the care that I give my patients, adding the birth order, which I'm just still learning about, and all of his new material, including the cycles and seasons. I think that we have many, many tools that we can use for ourselves in our lives and for our practices. So at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Danny.
I've decided that we're going to do a second part of the iris today. And today I wanted to go into some of the underlying iris positions, but I wanted to focus primarily on one small area of the iris. The area that I have been the most intrigued with of the entire iris is this area at the bottom of the eye in both irises. I spent a profoundly interesting, frustrating 7 years drawing these individual maps. So I literally, I saw hundreds and hundreds of people, and I was obsessed with drawing this map as a result of talking to people and also these individual areas. It took me 7 years to recognize that all of these positions that have a vast myriad of human behavior, emotions, reactions, that virtually anything that you experience or see as the dynamic in a family or a personality is up here somewhere. And in combination with the other side, which by the way, the left means the left eye of the person, and the left eye is related to the mother's side of the family or all the women in the family tree, by the way. The right eye is masculine or all the men in the family tree, and how all of these merge together to create the overall genetic or epigenetic influences that come like waves down through the family tree. The profound thing that really touched me was realizing that all of these positions were actually doing the same thing. They were providing a series of social emotional experiences as an ongoing sequence of the flow of something I would call a trigger. So they were basically supplying repetitious personality patterns. And that's why I realized that most of these were circles. They were some kind of a circuit. So today I call them circuits. And what is a circuit? A circuit is an unresolved emotion flowing between at least 2 people. That means my mother's relationship to her father and her father's relationship to her, because they're not always the same, by the way. My mother's feelings about her father and how her father treated her is a circuit, and how my grandfather treated my mother is a circuit of how he felt about her. And then you have 2 simultaneously rotating circuits that now become continuously repetitious down through the family tree. Now wait, that's a lot. An unresolved emotion between my mother and her father is a rotating continuous loop tape of feelings that does not go away. Now it can travel down the family tree to her children to where it becomes mother's father's father, or in my case, my son would be father's mother's father. And each one of these different gender-based orientations has also a loop tape circuit to it. Then you find out that my mother's relationship to her mother is another circuit. My mother's relationship to her grandmother, and my grandmother's relationship to my mother, and my grandmother's relationship to me. These are circuits. And if I never met my grandmother, which on my mother's side I didn't because she died when my mother was 5, I have feelings about not having a grandmother from my mother's side of the family. And you'll find out later that these are also part of what is called now in the last 10 years, the epigenetic markers, which is an epigenetic, for those who are not familiar with the term. Epi means above, and they're basically the crystallized emotional stress from a moment or an era in time in the past. So if your ancestors had a shocking war thing 100 years ago that you knew nothing about, or they had a violent abuse, a rape, whatever, that crystallized emotional memory is actually coded through a protein and tags along onto the gene code like sand on the top of a railroad track. They used to call it junk DNA. And so most of the time during conception, that all of that's basically clean except for one single line. I think there's more than one, but one single line that comes down, that's called the methylation line. Methylation is the process of converting a stressful moment into this crystallized protein. Now, what that is for me is a circuit. All that is an unresolved feeling about how my great-grandmother felt during the Civil War, coming down to somewhere in the family tree. And if I'm aligned to, which is the birth order line, is also how to determine which methylation line you got, for example. Now, I know that there are women in the room who are the number 1 girl genetically of the father, and that's typically means your methylation process is mostly aligned to father's side of the family and father's mother and so on. And there's a series of reasons why you take on more things from your father's family than your mother's family. But I have to tell you, the ones on your mother's family are waiting for you to get a little older. And then they start kicking in at certain stages of life. And we discovered that most of the genes are calendar based, which means they will turn on at specific times or ages, oftentimes depending on hormonal activity, and it turns them on. These are long-term influences. Now, what we discover is it's not required of us to be ruled by them, but they do exist. Now, it's possible, in most cases, 95% of them are actually transmitted down to somebody else in the family tree, and it may go, and they now have scientific evidence that it goes 3 generations into the future. So if somebody has an addiction to smoking, which, by the way, we will have a bibliography of the scientific articles that say this is true, but you can go on Google and the internet and find it for yourself. That if somebody has an addiction to smoking, for example, they've confirmed that the impact of that smoking will travel 3 generations and will spread down different parts of the family tree according to the genders of the children that are conceived and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. They get it not just in the original position of the lung, but they get it in other body or associated positions, and that can trigger for them a different kind of disease based on the emotions that they're having. Phew. Now that's a lot to consider, that our unresolved emotions in the moment are linked to our mother and father, and it's linked to their mother and father, and so on and so on. And we're all one big mosh pit of unresolved emotions that are continuously circling. So that's why for me, when I realized that all of these positions are doing the same thing, I wanted to, and I did for, this was, by the way, this is back to 1982 in this particular chart, the formation of it. And then I started looking for what the point was that was relative to, is there some central way that I can, by some act of combination of things, be able to transform this circuit into a resolved emotion that would now clear out symptoms of a disease and or protect my own self or my own children from future effects of somebody else's decision to be addicted. That's pretty out there. But for me, it's no longer out there. It's now scientific fact in many ways. You can go in to see what they're doing it, and the pharmaceutical companies already have in the pipeline some 60 to 70 individual synthetic molecules designed to help you remove biochemically one of these single points. Now, CRISPR, which you probably already know, is an instrument for programming viruses to be able to go in and snip out specific genes and put a new one in, is already underway. It's already done. It's not woo-woo science anymore. They can take spina-bifida babies that are identified in the womb, do a CRISPR to rearrange their genetic code, and the baby's born normal. Now this is what's actually happening. They're doing it on adults with sickle cell anemia. You can go look this up on the internet. It's not hard to find. So I'm in favor of either pharmaceuticals or any other form of invention that saves the child or person's life or gives them a long enough time to become more responsible for what's created it. I'm in favor of herbal medicine, homeopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, yoga postures, visualizations, breath work, all of those technologies and understanding as a way to be able to resolve and keep somebody's body alive, and giving them a little bit longer to be able to become more responsible for the emotions inside them. So that's what this is mostly about. Now, the most challenging position I was referring to was the ones straight down in almost a V-like shape. It took me a long time to understand that it regulates the circulation of life force into the human body, meaning the tailbone, pelvic cavity, coccyx, down at the bottom, is basically a circulation point where the acupuncture points on the toes, and there are two primary ones on every toe, and there are two on the ankles, so you got 12. They're coming up the instep of the inside smooth muscles of the legs, arriving into the lower pelvic cavity, circulating up through the body and down again on the outside. And I just drew a picture for you. Up the middle, down the outside. Same thing as trees. Xylem up, phloem down. Xylem up the middle, phloem down the outside. And the human body is designed in the same way. It's doing the same type of thing. So this circulation that's moving is actually empowering the circuits that are responsible for the repetition of the experiences of emotion. So the system is designed to continually replicate an unresolved emotion until it is resolved. I'll just basically say that again. There is a system of survival in the human being that takes ancestral memories and must by necessity keep repeating them, either genetically, transferring them down to subsequent generations, or emotionally, socially, repeating them around you, so that your automatic way of receiving or attracting people is automatically arranged for you to have specific kinds of emotional interactions. We're constantly drawing situations and people to us that exactly match the unresolved gene code in one of the circuits. It's happening all the time. So we keep attracting certain situations, people, whatever they are, And it's just circling and circling and circling and circling. Here comes another one circling and circling and circling. I'm interested in appreciating the marvelous design of that instrument and then cooperating with that instrument to be able to dissolve or remove the circuitry while also adding something more positive into the circuitry, so that the same instrument that was transmitting and recreating the painful stuff will now automatically repeat and transmit and rebuild the new one automatically. The same mechanism. I used to be upset about this mechanism, by the way. I won't tell you all the things I did about this mechanism, about calling it names at times and what it's doing in subconscious, unconscious stuff and female stuff and mitochondrial DNA names, I used to call it, until I found out this mechanism is absolutely powerful. It cannot be lost, it cannot be killed, it cannot be given away, it cannot be surmounted, it cannot be suicided. No matter what you do, this definitive function that holds all this together is absolutely powerful. And cooperation with it is your only choice. Because even if you were to meet an accident going down the elevator or something, or you go home and you die of a stroke or heart attack, that same mechanism, it has all of the memories saved for you. And you just dropped your body and all your memories go with you no matter where you are. And the composite reality of all those emotional memories determines your location of what you are naturally gravitating toward. Now, if hidden inside of you is a whole bunch of social emotional rage that was unresolved in the family tree, there's a natural gravitational influence to the places to help you find it. Because in the spirit world, it is like attracts like. So you go to a place where there are people just like you who have the exact same unresolved emotions that you're carrying along with you. So I'm earnestly most interested in how to do it now and set in motion a genuine respect and the application of diligent efforts of how to be able to cooperate with it. I just want to be cooperative with this mechanism, and then it shows you a bit more about how to do it. So that's what I'm referring to in this, and I will be delighted to go through this item by item, number by number, to tell you more about the feelings about it. Now, I have also just divided this in sectors. I found out later that each one of these, if you take a pie and you make these sectors, in the last class we did more of the sectors, each one of these sectors relates to a gland, an organ, a body system, a grandparent. So inside your body, sorry, you've got all of your grandparents and all of your glands and organs. They are associated with all of the feelings that are in your family tree, going through this continuous process of loop tape. And we call that living. When in reality, it's a continuous form of reaction response, and the way we respond to that determines the quality of our success. Okay, so if you will, a leap of faith. Oh, by the way, I think a leap of faith may be our most effective way to move through this. And I will let you know that most everything that I do is only from my own experience. And I do my best to not become an editor of anything else. So I'm not an iridologist per se, never trained in that way or other ways. My way of accessing the information has been the result of a series of experiences that go back to my mid-20s, where the very first experiences of the iris and its meaning basically arrived. And the result of that was I've had dozens of other experiences where my desire to want to experience something brings to me a series of experiences either within myself or within social phenomenon, and I observe and I accumulate, And I now then feed back to other people to say, this is what I learned about the iris. There are these little brown spots, which, by the way, they are confirmed to have certain attributes by psychological inventory tests. And also, each one of these positions or constitutional patterns now have scientifically valid information about what that constitution acts like. Now, my information is oftentimes different than what the psychologists who are testing the iris come up with, but I have experiences that I'd like to share with people to give them a chance to be able to say yay or nay. For example, the birth order experience was something I sought for an understanding for several years, and then one night it came and I got the opportunity to experience it, and I'm quite willing to, at another time, share a variety of these experiences, make them available for anyone to go, is this guy wonkers or not, but also give you the opportunity to test it. So all the way through this, my suggestion is use your own common sense, use your own experience, use your own logic, use your sense of intuitiveness, and then use the opportunity to have an open mind long enough to see if there's something that you might experiment with to arrive at the conclusion I have about some experience. So no, I have made thousands of mistakes. I've been wrong many times, and I'm still not right about everything I do, but I'm diligently wanting to keep exploring. And those who've known me over the last 40 years, they know I'm relatively relentless about how I do these things. And now the testing of the iris and the birth order and even some of the cycles and seasons, they're becoming more known in society. But when I first started doing this 40 years ago, the pineal was nearly useless. It had no purpose. And I was talking about what its real purpose was. And I was completely poo-pooed by other people. And then I was also talking about how the transfer of emotional phenomenon from ancestors is coming through the family tree, which has now become the study of epigenetics. So I'm saying generally in the long run, what my experiences are for me turn out to be accurate. And where they're not repeatable by someone else, I have a tendency to delete them. But my arrival to these things is very personal to me. How do I arrive at these things? Well, I think I arrive at this as a result of early childhood and ancestral influences, creating the self-survival mechanism for me to learn how to go out of my body in order to prevent pain and suffering in my childhood. So the result of that was, it's almost like I learned at an early age to kind of go up periscope. And I started really in my early childhood, I started seeing things around me. I could see spirits around me. I had a series of experiences that other people couldn't see, but I couldn't understand why they couldn't see it. And then by my mid-20s, I started having experiences where I could see the next level of the spirit world. And I could see what happens when people leave and where they might go. So I started having a series of experiences. But each one of these experiences kept leading me back to a single place. It's a little annoying to me to know that it's a single place, but I realize now it's very important. And that means ownership over my own existence. The primary thing I needed to learn about all of this going out experiences, which I'm very grateful for many things, that I could share what my personal experience was about how it's all put together. To keep coming back to, I have to be in my body with a greater sense of responsibility for the dignity of my own existence and learn to be 100% responsible for every feeling inside of me, no matter where it came from. So I have to become 100% responsible that no matter what's coming at me, I need to be able to learn how to deal with it myself. Now, part of that process is what led me to the observation of circuits in the iris. And now it's much more apparent to me what it is, how it is, and theoretically how I might access it. So I've been applying this information on myself for years, and I have applied many things incorrectly. For example, very difficult experiences in the early 80s, where I spent several years working with severely deformed infants with a group of doctors. And the emotional impact of seeing these severely deformed children had such an impact on me because of my own childhood. So I was very sensitive to the physical deformities and basically really dedicated myself to look for the causations and the potential solutions, and eventually came into, with the supervision of medical doctors, to work with severely deformed infants and found some ways to bring them out of physical deformity when they were young enough, meaning 2 to 3, much easier, 4, harder, 5, harder, 6 or 7, nah. Anything past 7, I had virtually no capacity to be able to influence it physically, but realized it was possible to influence it emotionally. So I won't go through the history of all that, but one of the history about that is I started to only want to identify the structural constitutional perfection in every child. Because my experience is the thing that caused the damage is much bigger than you think. Because the thing that's caused the damage in all of us has gone on longer than a single family tree. What's caused the damage in all of us on Earth is the accumulative damage of what men and women have done to each other for thousands of years. Pretty equally, by the way. I know it looks like a patriarchy, but there's a lot of damage given to each other about gender-based phenomena. So my aspiration was only focus on the positive. And I literally put 30 years of my life into, okay, if the only way to overcome the pain and suffering is to think positive, visualize, meditate these things, do these things, and be, light, 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 light. Love, 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 love. Well, it took me another 30 years to recognize, however useful that is, however temporarily effective that is, temporarily might be a decade or 3 decades, or 1,000 years it might be effective in the spirit world. But eventually, what you find out is all of that diligent effort to do light, 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 light has actually been an applied use of one's will to avoid the actual damage that is contained inside the soul. So then it took me, by the way, some very, very painful collapses of my social personal world to recognize I had been diligently denying the existence of the pain inside of me. And so then I turn around and go, okay, light, 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 light has a reason, has a purpose, don't give it up. But now I'm dedicated to how to be able to access, feel, and eventually become responsible for all the damage inside of myself. So that's where I've gone through the New Age world of it. I've tried hundreds and hundreds of remedies, dozens and dozens of combination of different forms of allopathic remedies, all kinds of light, color, sound, homeopathics, posture, breath, different forms of this or that, Qigong, Tai Chi. Oh, by the way, I tried many different things, rituals and imagery, sacred art, many different things. Some of them work very well for a period of time. Some of them work better on one side of the family than the other side. And I try to keep aware of how that's really working. Then it comes down to, in the recent last decade, that the realization is, I'm sorry about this, it's your mother. I know that's kind of weird, but found that mothers have a stronger overall biochemical, social, emotional influence than fathers do, and that their relationship to their mother and the grandmother's relationship to her mother is a very powerful series of very profound gates, circuits. And until I'm actually willing to acknowledge and utilize the understanding of the answer exists in my mother's family. Now, I know that's weird, but for me, and I'll show you why, there are two sides. There are the women from my father's side. Good luck. Because the women from the father's side, they hold my whole autonomic system together, and they hold my DNA, and they keep my heart beating and my lungs breathing, and thank you, thank you, thank you. They help me assimilate my food. They regenerate my scar on my left elbow. They keep regenerating all of my chaos and pain. And they're wonderful women, don't get me wrong. But on the mother's side, there is a tiny pinpoint that I must activate. And where I'm going to get to at the end of this is I'm going to invite you to consider the possibility that to change into the future, you need to address 3 gates on your mother's side of the family.
And this is for men and women.
For men and women. That no man is going to successfully go really anywhere beyond his repetition of his past pattern without successfully desiring to grow, feel. The answer is feel and the desire to grow. Now, the challenge is a sincere desire to want to feel, combined with the desire to want to grow, automatically creates an infusion of the increase of feelings. But unfortunately, those feelings, they go automatically to the compulsion of how the 3 women from the father's side utilize the increase of feeling to now increase the magnitude or the effectiveness of their habits. So if somebody just increases feeling, it has an effect. Now, the interesting part of it is we were born like batteries, meaning we had a collective, you want to call it karmic, you have a collective history, you have a collective constitution of body and mind, you have your own mathematical formula for the energy that exists inside you before you incarnated, during your pregnancy, your mother's pregnancy, during your childhood, and accumulating all the choices you've made, you have a field of energy. It's in a closed loop tape until you decide to change it. When you decide to change it, you're basically going to be opening your Pandora's box up, and all of the unresolved feelings in the exact sequence good for you will automatically be brought to you. I'll try that again. The sincere desire to want to feel and grow will start to bring to you a personal cascade of unresolved social emotional memories for you to resolve. I would like to give you suggestions about how you might experiment with that. And I'll also give you some suggestions that when you start to do that, you're going to create a cascade of unusual and challenging events, and a whole bunch of beautiful ones too, but you're going to come more into a degree of responsibility of what you're giving to your grandkids and great-grandkids. I consider myself an advocate of your great-grandchildren. Regardless of what you go through, that's all very nice. I appreciate who you are in that regard. But if you are responsible about your feelings, even a little bit now, you're changing future generations and the DNA that you give to them and the life you give to them, and you change it very quickly. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So a long-winded answer is nearly everything that I have or I teach is only my experience. Now, there are some things that I find that are really hard to resist looking at. Like, I used to love the work of reading. I picked up the book of Alexander Lowen once, Language of the Body, and it was exactly what I was working on. It was so good, I had to put it down. Because I find that anytime I pick up anything else that belongs to someone else, mine stops. And it can take me months to get it back again, so I don't go there very often. So I make no comparisons to Ayurvedic medicine, Tibetan medicine, and because of my way of being in the world, I've made over 50 trips around the world, country to country, and I've met a lot of different teacher, shaman, healer types, you name it, in cities, forests, and jungles. And I've learned a lot. They've been basically teachers for me to be able to assimilate what they're showing me they do. And I like to see the things that work, and the things that don't work, I leave out, and then I assimilate and test the things I like. And when I can really see it's working for me, then I pass it on to other people that I offer teaching for. So I hope that gave you some answer to your question about where does this all come from? Does that help?
Well, honestly, I feel like you're leaving out, where the hell does the iris fit into all of this? I mean, like, honestly, and you have talked all of these huge things, and like, where's this freaking map come from that we're supposed to study? I mean, we don't have to. Obviously, I feel drawn to it. That's why I'm here, not just this time, but last time. I don't know what to do with any of it, but I am probably of a similar ilk to you as far as my own analytical nature. I need to see what works. If it doesn't work, I throw it out. I keep moving forward. You know, I have a lot of similar patterns in how I assess things. But I haven't heard you show up on the iris, or why even pull up the iris as a template, and how have you honed or independently developed a map? Not to say I'm gonna get to where, you know, all of the details, but like I see your motivation. I still don't know, how does that show up as now we're looking at the iris and trying to you know, back engineer this kind of data. And so that's the nature of my question.
So you're challenging me to tell you how I got into all of this. And to really do that justice would probably take us an additional hour. And I'm willing to set up a class where I will discuss all of that on video and make it an archive available to other people so that they have experiences that I've had. And what I mean by that is, I believe that my way of having experiences is available to everyone. And I would more likely want to share what I do and how I get there. So even the function of the iris, it came over a period of time. What was that? Thank you.
Can I interject one thing?
Yes.
Before the question, as you were closing your discussion of the, looking for the right word, the stuff we carry with us from our 3 levels of ancestors that we can track. How about the baggage that we carry if you believe in past lives? How does that integrate into this discussion? Or does it even?
The question, for those of you who may not have heard the question, and I'm going to just paraphrase it, is how does prior lives lead into or impact this overall study? And again, I've had experiences. I went to 2 different phases of information about prior lives, and I had a series of experiences for myself about prior lives. And then I had a series of experiences unfolding my belief system that I no longer participate in prior lives. Meaning that I now know that the likelihood of spirit influence who wishes to influence me by transmitting their prior life in a way to help me want to believe it was my prior life I found to be capable of influencing me, so I don't even go there anymore. So now my current position is, it doesn't matter how many lives you believe you have, the one you have right now is the single most important. And the one that you had when you first incarnated for the first time is one I think is important for you to consider. What I mean by that is, before you incarnated, in my experience, the first time, you were created as a unique individual soul of which there were no carbon copies of any kind, no copies of you, that you and I and everyone else is a distinctly individual, unique soul. And that you have attributes, everyone else in the room has attributes, anybody else in the world has attributes unique to them. And eventually, when we all recognize that, we can share them all. Eventually, we all add individual uniqueness into the composite, maybe a very long time from now. But if I will not occupy my individuality, I can't give it to you. So in order for me to be able to have the optimum development as a soul, the very first thing I need to do is be responsible for my own existence and be exactly who I am as I was originally conceived. So the pattern I usually use, if I might grab one of my little visual aids, I like to, and probably you remember this from before, I like to use a 12-sided Rubik's Cube with all of the facets now messed up in a way that my pristine self had no flaws whatsoever. Then the conception, this came, and the mechanism of my own soul grabbed onto all of the interior ancestral influences in my mother and father going back into a very long time. It grabbed my family influences and the influence of the community I lived in, was born in. It also brought an energy of the country I was dwelling in and gave me somewhat of their accumulative memory for me to deal with. It brought me into a stage of time on Earth where now I have an influence because of the timing I'm in, but it also brought me into another level of influence about what's gone on for thousands of years about men and women, communities, countries, races, cultures, religions. All of that's inside of me. Now, I'm dedicated to respecting that it exists, and I'm dedicated to the experience of gleaning the positive out of the experiences and leaving behind the residue of unloving behavior that was transmitted to me through my family tree and through that conception. So what I'm most interested in is having my unique, pristine soul and infusing that with all of the positive elements of what I know exists. And I've learned some things about how to do that. I'd like to pass them along. And I'd like to respect all the damage that my own country has done. For example, by the way, my own country that I've paid taxes to since being a child when I would start, picking up eggs at the egg farm and paying Social Security, I'm paying into an economic social system where my government, to me, by the way, government happens to be a four, and my government, my country has been involved in causing great harm to millions of people. Great harm to the world, to the earth, economically, socially. And my country and many other countries, by the way, have been involved in genocide, imperialism, economic domination, slavery, and you name it, patriarchy, other things. My country and many other countries have contributed to a lot of very, very painful things I have inside of me. All I want to do now is recognize what my contribution has been and successfully become responsible enough for it that I might be able to successfully feel it and remove that damage that I'm continuing to cause. Now, I'm continuing to cause damage to my country, to the globe, And that damage is being fed back to me, just my opinion, that those things going on in the world right now have been going on for a very long time. So the global condition of the world is causing us to suffer. Why is it suffering? It's just simply feeding back to us the accumulation of all of our collective choices. Is it really loving to go into a country to engage in slavery and genocide and call that conquest or something? We do it. Civilizations have done it for a very long time. I no longer want to participate in any of that. I want to find a way to do the most loving thing I can to the individuals in my family, to the community around me, to the country, to the globe, and also higher than that. What I mean by that is, for every place that there is a violent act, there are many other discarnate entities that are participating. So if I'm engaged in something that's involved in destruction through rage, hatred, cynicism, attack, political or social, there are spirits who utilize that to attack other people and or spirits. Now that was a mouthful. I just said, if I'm participating in something and I'm transmitting it to the world, there are spirits who will use it to do violence to themselves and other people, either in the body or out of the body. Now, I don't expect you to believe that, but we are surrounded by spirits all the time. Now, I've had the fortunate and unfortunate experience of encountering them. Not always a pleasant experience, I can assure you. Some of them really want to help and other ones don't. So I'm suggesting I would like to remove my contribution to human suffering, and then add in something that might have a positive infusion about what will bring health, happiness, peace, prosperity to all future generations. My responsibility is to get my part dealt with. I'm still dealing with my part. Now that's where we're going with this, and I'll come back to and share with you my experiences about the eyes in great detail. It's quite the story how it came, and the birth order and the timeline. So I will pick just one because it's one of my favorites about how, did I explain how the birth order arrived last time? I'll share one short experience to give you an example. The birth order, which to me, the birth order is more than the birth order. It is a composite of each one of the spheres of the higher world and all of the glands, organs, and body systems. And it arrived because I spent a decade or more looking at irises of 3, 4, and 5 generation families, starting with the deformed infants, making wall maps of photography of iris patterns, and couldn't understand why a mother and father would come in with 3 kids, and the 3 children would have different iris constitutions than either one of the parents. And so where I would get the grandparents or the great-grandparents, and you would start to see how certain things lined up, and I could never quite get what the map was, but I could see that there was an underlying reason why the birth order was there. So my way of getting information is to ask. So when I ask, to me, it's a prayer-based reality that I believe in a divine creator source. And in my youth, I used to be quite obstinate and downright, at times disrespectful, because I would demand that the information be delivered. Well, I was told once that you needed to be passionate and zealot in order to receive information. So I used to have an insistent way of asking and meditating for the information to arrive. One night when I'm in South America and I'm meditating on this single subject, I was meditating and a light glowed right at my forehead line. It was like a glowing mango, and I just happened to be underneath a house that had a beautiful mango tree. So during the day, I was watching these native boys throwing rocks at mangoes at the top to knock them off and then try to catch them before they hit the ground. And I love mangoes anyway. In the middle of this mango experience, my inner vision opened. Now, for those of you who've had an experience like this, when it occurs, you realize that what you're seeing is many times more beautiful and many times more real than what you call reality. Because when you turn around and you look back, you realize that where we live is a darkened place of shadows. It looks real, I admit it to you. The whole physical world looks real. But eventually, it all dissolves, it's all composted, and it leaves. But in the spirit world, it doesn't leave. So in the spirit world, when that spirit vision opens, you see things far more clearly than the human eye can imagine. It is more sparklingly pristine than daylight, because there's no daylight that's that clear, because in this world, there are shadows everywhere. In that inner world, there are no shadows. So in this experience, what I saw was 6 beautiful, luminous, living, sparkling lights in a vertical line, and I knew instantly, which is part of the process, that it was 6 brothers from the oldest down to the youngest, 6 in a row. And I didn't understand that there were 6 aspects of masculinity. And those sparkling, beautiful lights now became 6 beautiful boys in a humanoid body, one above the other. And then there came 6 more radiantly beautiful, sparkling white lights of equal beauty and luminousness. And they were 6 sisters from the first down to the 6th. And they became beautiful young women all above each other. And they moved their hands in such a beautiful way. And the boys did theirs. And when their hands touched, these 1 and 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 3 and 4 and 4 and 5 and 5 and 6 and 6, they started to turn like a ladder into a little bit of a helix. The moment I thought DNA, my head, my body, everything in me exploded. And I went into an infinitely indescribable ocean of like pure wet cream, white, beautiful cream laced with honey. And it completely saturated my entire body and perfused all the way through me this amazingly wonderful sense of utter, absolute, loving joy. And in the middle of that experience, the floodgates of the meaning of these 12 brothers and sisters, the body systems, glands, organ systems, and things people have not even conceived of, nor can I remember, all came at once. And then it's over. All I could do was lay on the floor and sob for the profound beauty. Then afterwards, I could remember almost nothing. Just very slowly, 6 boys, 6 girls. And for the last nearly 40 years, 35 years, I'm slowly reconstructing the usefulness and the knowledge of how those actually produce an amazingly beautiful Fibonacci spiral by numbers and music and color and sounds and fragrances, but all of those relate to what you and I have as a heritage and an opportunity as souls. So what I saw and still know in the moment is inside me are 6 boys. Inside me are 6 girls. And just by the way, the boys go up the front and the girls go down the back. Have you ever heard the principle that behind any successful man, or woman by the way, is a woman? Well, the female is behind. The male is in the front. The male is associated with ascending, and the masculine is associated with, the women in the back are coming down, they're descending. And how this all works, I'm intrigued with how to be able to participate with it. So that's how the experience of the birth order arrived. So I did what I could to write a book. Now, because of the nature of this information, I make that information available for free. It's on the internet. And for me, the more sacred the information, the more my obligation within myself and my own ethics to make it freely available to anyone. It's not mine. It's my experience. Now, my filtered experience of 6 boys and 6 girls is just filtered through my own warped perception. So I'm still cleaning out the warped places and getting more information about how these work. I have no claim to perfection in the information or myself. All I do is keep working on what this feels like and acts like, and then making it available for other people as openly as possible. So this information, by the way, it's yours to do anything you want to do with. If you want to write a book, make a chart, do something, give it away, sell it, market it, do whatever, it's up to you. Because I'll give it to you as freely as possible. If you choose to give something back because you want to, that's your conscience. But I will have no anticipation or no expectation that you should ever give me anything before we can talk. That's basically what my attitude about it is. So how to be able to make this more available. That's one example of dozens. That was the most personal one for me. It was very, very powerful, but the eyes was more powerful. I'm not willing to do that today. I'm really not in the capacity to be able to explain it all.
But can I jump in?
Sure.
Because I think one of the things that we're really looking at doing here is utilizing that information, which, really just came in. But my experience working with irises, and it isn't iridology, it's looking at iris patterns, and those patterns, as well as birth order, give you a sense of who you are. So you talked about the pristine soul, or you have talked about the pristine soul, and that's our imprint and how we came in. Then we've also talked about the damage and all the, epigenetic lineage of emotions and harm and, unloving acts between men and women that countries have done, that society have done. Well, if we want to take on that personal responsibility, then it really does help to understand who we are and what those patterns are. And I think utilizing the soul, actual imprint that they gave us through iris and birth order is the way that we are able to take a measure of responsibility.
Yes, and for me, the opportunity to emotionally feel my own existence automatically brings to me a series of experiences to more closely examine the things I'm denying. So I never, until the last 10 years, I didn't grasp how that works. Now, even this week, I'm actually learning more about how that works. And we're going to provide the arena for people to take what they can of the information, and if they want to participate in a number of different ways, and if they want to participate by making measurements, be it eyesight numbers or blood chemistry numbers, then there are different groups of people in different parts of the world who are going to do that, and then try these different ways of working with the feelings and the circuits over a period of time. 6 months, a year later, make the measurements again. And we're looking for how to be able to have confirming information that the knowledge that when it's applied has physical, emotional results. Not for me, I don't need that much, but it's nice to be able to give things to other people to be able to say, look, this really can work. So that's where I'm coming from with it.
Right, and we want to have different tracks, different programs, and to go even more in depth on understanding iris, understanding birth order. I think we're going to try to do a little bit more today on the specifics on the iris and a little bit on some of these programs, but the plan really is to have in-depth trainings in many of these different areas.
Yes, this is something of an overview, and within the next 3 weeks, we're going to have an extensive recording of constitutional types of the iris, and that will be available on a recording. It will be available for you to have, so you can study the iris in that regard. And then the same thing is going to be true in the birth order. If that's your interest, you can have all that information. I'm going to suggest to you that some of this more recent information is the most useful you could ever apply. And that's why the lines, if you could just turn off the lights for a moment. These lines at the bottom of the iris, both sides, to me, they correspond to the gate where life force can circulate in the body up and down. And I'm suggesting that there is a series of very specific feelings that when you choose to experience a sequence of feelings, it opens a gate that has not been opened before. Maybe you've opened it somewhat, but you can add to it. And what is it? It's feelings, truth, authenticity, or feelings, truth, and free will, or humility, aspiration, in some degree discovery, non-judgment, discernment, transparency, and the creative expression that leads to an opening of one particular circuit. Now that's what I'm most excited about, is this area down here. It has a specific sequence of very easy to do feelings that turn out to be extremely challenging to actually do. And I'm going to describe what that looks like and take you through some other pictures. I'm interested in explaining to you this circuitry and why this part of the lower pelvic cavity is so important for you to be able to at least acknowledge and add to the life force coming through the bottom of your body to increase the amplitude of your own battery. Could you move it forward? We used a symbol like this before. This background image is a torus. This is a lower torus, but that's basically a fountain of life force that's circulating and moving. This same circulation has two different forces. It has ascending and descending forces. So I'm going to more accurately describe the sequence of these ascending and descending forces, because the ascending descending is by its own self a circuit. In nature, it's not a circuit, it's a cycle. And the difference is a circuit is a closed loop. A cycle is not. A cycle of a season is not a closed loop. The circuits of unresolved feelings inside of me are closed until I choose to learn to want to open them. You can use cycles to help you open circuits. The circuits being unresolved emotions. The next one, please. It looks something like this. There are these circles, by the way, they correspond to grandparents on the father's side. The circles are grandmothers, and these different grandmothers, father's mother, just to give you an idea of the orientation, father's father's mother, and father's mother's mother, these three work together as a unit. And they are extremely powerful. They do all of the inner work. They hold everything in the past. So if you're a number one girl, you have to be careful that you'll have a tendency to tell stories about the past. And your reassociation to tradition and family and the old, that sometimes it can actually betray you by holding too much. On the opposite side, in the same position, the front of this by the way, happens to be first chakra. The difference is the front half of the first chakra is a specific grandfather. The second one at 3 is a specific great-grandfather, and the number 5 is another great-grandfather. These 3 work in absolute concert with the other ones, and these are all associated with everything that you ever would wish to produce in the future. So one side of your family tree is everything about holding the past. Another side of your family tree is about creating the future. But the past is so much more currently stronger than the future. But these 3, mother's father, which is number 1, and the mother's father, which is number 3, and mother's father's father, I know it sounds like a lot, but mother's father's father happens to be number 5. Number 5 is 1/2 of your throat-oriented chakra. There are 2 parts, and I'm suggesting to you that has to do with the volitional use of your free will. Your right to create something, your right to initiate something, to set in motion something. I'm going to suggest to you that when those 3 are intentionally linked and utilized in the way that they flow, what's available is a dynamic of circulation that was not available before. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that that circulation has a specific season of the year. When is the ascent of day length? In the Northern Hemisphere, it's December 21st. In the Southern Hemisphere, it's June 21st. There is an ascending through the winter that arrives at spring. And then there is a summer experience that goes over the top and down. Then there's an autumn experience that goes back down to the bottom. And there is a circulation of ascending and descending. And I'm suggesting to you that were you to use cycles of time, you can change the circuitry of unresolved feelings more quickly. Now, the same thing is true in times of the day. There are times of the day that are 1-3-5. There are times of the day which are 5-3-1. And you'll see on the female side, it's 2-directional, because the females have the capacity, like a tree, to either grow more buds and branches or go down to the roots. But the xylem level of a tree only goes up. So from the inside, it goes up, and from the outside, it goes down. The same circuitry is available inside the human body. I'll go into this another time. This is a more colorful expression of the same pattern, and the primary place that that ascending and circulating pattern needs to be is at the bottom of the body. The torso function, yes, there's one coming in the bottom of the feet, and there's others coming in at the knees, and at the hips, all the way through. There are other circulations, but this is the primary one. Next.
And Danny, that you can see on the iris, because that iris marking at that 6 o'clock gives you an indication of what's happening with that energy.
This area of the iris is the most commonly disturbed location. Now, this whole area also relates to kidney, adrenal, and this is the channel by which life force is circulated at the bottom of the body. And for nearly everyone I meet, there is some form of disturbance in that location. It is the #1 place of disturbance in all cultures of the world that I visited.
Exactly, and I'm just going to add too, because that's a very important point where I'm looking when I'm doing an iris evaluation. If you look there, you can see, and there's certain parts where it might be more related to kidney, more related to adrenals, but again, it's not iridology as an iridologist would use it, but that's where I'm going to be looking to see if there's a depletion of life force, or if where some of those stressors are coming from. And, that's something that I've been doing. But then, as you said, adding in the birth order and all these other pieces, it gives you a much more exacting look at what's really going on with that individual.
And the location that we're talking about is primarily composed of self-image. The self-image also holds all of the belief systems I have about me. Now, this area of the iris is primarily composed of feelings about mother's feelings about her own mother. I know that's a challenging thing to recognize, but your mother's feelings about her own mother and your grandmother's feelings about your mother, they are a very, very powerful circuit that now affects your interior self-image of how you are going to treat yourself. Now, by the way, these are influences that do not have to be determined to control you, but at least the acknowledgement that they exist is helpful. Next. Now, this is my basic way of how to explain one of the elements of the human energy field. I like to consider that the human being, in the way I see them, is somewhat like an egg. We are sitting inside of an egg that has a series of layers inside of it. These interior colors that you see, they are very systematically organized layers inside the energy field of the person. Now, in the background of this is the sun on one side, the moon on the other, the galaxy on the other planets throughout. What we are, without knowing it, is that we are surrounded by absolute mathematical perfection, where the exact location of the sun and the moon 10 million years from now is already known. We're surrounded by a mathematically perfect environment or a womb. And for me, that represents the powder blue and the violet or the white or the pink on the outside. We're encased. Now, the intriguing part of this is, if you look at the eggs of birds in nature, or even turtles or alligators, the adults don't chip away the shell. No eagle chips away the shell or helps its own child to be born. The same thing is true for us. The mechanism is waiting for us to decide that we want to be more fully responsible for expanding our capacity to fly. Now, my way is, that's your future, that's my future. To me, we all have the same future, which is the opportunity to be able to go anywhere we want in the universe eventually, when we take on the responsibility of seeing what we're currently doing that would be damaging to any part of the universe. So if I'm involved in a self-pity or a rage or an action or a blame or an expectation or a demand or a control or a suffocation or a repression, if I'm doing anything that is unloving to the world around me and to myself, it is automatically fed back to me individually, collectively in a community or family, collectively in a country, into a race or a culture that transcends boundaries of countries, into religious disorders or other forms. All of that is fed back to me. If I have a religious attitude of superiority, that my religion is superior to yours, and it's an unloving way to view you and your life, then there is a consequence of every single feeling I have that's fed back to me and my children or grandchildren. So any act of rage, however subtle it might be, has for me the power of the sun. Now pause for that for a moment, because numerically this is probably accurate, that the soul's power to exist is equal to or greater than the physical sun. That's the power of the soul eventually. So any act of rage I have right now has that influence to go out into my individual and collective world to feed back to me the repercussions of my actions. That's just simply how I see it.
Carried down.
And carried down through the family tree. So for me, the suffering on earth that we see is the result of unloving behavior of generations and generations before us, arriving to a crescendo that we now have become global. 50 years ago, we weren't global. In the 60s, when I was a child looking at television, we had 3 channels, and you were lucky to get 2 or 1 of them. And then you had to turn the antenna to get a little bit of that. The greatest invention I ever had in the 70s was a fax machine. Do you know what my business machines class was at the university where I went to the first year? Punch 2 numbers and crank a handle. And then came in those little Fortran things of little chips, never mind, all the computer data came. And now look at the difference in the last 50 years. We are now capable of communicating all over the world instantaneously. For me, we have become global. Just so you know, global is a 5 for me. It's a 5. National is a 4, community is a 3, self is a 2, family is a 1, and I need to be able to go through all of these different sequences. Now, if the energy comes through me and it comes down in one of those slots, it's actually providing me the opportunity to accumulate a resistance in one of those categories. Is that too far out? I'll just try it again. The life force coming through me now comes down and empowers each one of those little rings. Next. I know this is a little bit more abstract, but I say that there are forces coming in from the earth. Did you know that there are forces available from the physical earth itself, and particularly the mineral kingdom? The mineral kingdom has a capacity to resonate sympathetically with the minerals in the human body, but only if the person who owns the minerals in the body chooses to do so. And then there are other ones that come in from the plant kingdom, and then we also have something from the animal kingdom. Next. Now, we are offering in the next 3 years at least these 4 different types of programs. One of them is we call harmonizing with nature. So all that really means is that there is ample scientific evidence to now show that a walk in the forest actually has measurable effects on blood chemistry, brain wave patterns. So we're suggesting that it might be possible under certain circumstances to use this circulating life force in the forest more effectively to enable you to receive the benefits of the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and animal kingdom, and deeply increase your appreciation and gratitude for the existence of the unity of all living things. That's a program that we're offering. We're offering that without any other part of the programs involved. It's not required that you measure your eyes before and after or your blood chemistry, though that's going to be available if you choose to. It doesn't require that you do anything, and we will provide you with a journal of every month of the year and how the influences of nature might help you increase that. So we're asking you to keep a journal if you want. There is no requirements that you participate at the end, but asking you to notice when you have significant events and so on. The second category is much more challenging because that involves, we would like to offer here and other places for you to be able to get your irises photographed, take the information of the evaluation from people who are qualified to do so, and to be able to utilize that information in combination with your birth order, and then learn how to be able to use nature and your family tree a little bit more significantly. And it's also more challenging for what you experience. Why is it more challenging? When you make a sincere desire to emotionally commit to people other than nature, you're going to have a different experience. By the way, nature's easier than people. So you can start with nature, strengthen yourself up, and you get a little stronger, and you go, okay, I'm ready to take on some people. And that's going to start out with, by the way, your mommy and daddy, your siblings, your kids, your grandparents, and you're going to start to learn that the sincere desire to be fully responsible for the feelings inside yourself is automatically going to send new experiences to you. And then we have some suggestions about what do you do when you're confronted with a trigger? What do you do hour to hour if you want to grow in the capacity to feel? The third one is how to utilize the different seasons of the year, and especially the solstice equinox time period, theoretically for using that rare opportunity in nature. For example, you probably already understand that at the equinox, the amount of light on both sides of the equator is equal. The day length is equal. And for me, in my comprehension of how that works, is that before that moment of equality, there is a resistance to both sides of the family tree. But in the moment of the equinox, there is the opportunity for the drawbridge to go down and theoretically to assist you to integrate more of the exercises that you've been putting in place. Okay, I'll try that again. The equinox, the solstice, is an amazing opportunity should you wish to participate. Then the last one is how to do that with other people from the other side of the world. So we would like to provide a website where you get friends from people from Australia, South Africa, India, and you get to go through, and that's not swipe left or right. It's just finding people that you think, I would like to appreciate this other brother or sister of mine who's in some other country, in Brazil, for example, and you can ask them, do you mind if I participate with you on the cycles and seasons? Because if you're participating with somebody on the opposite side of the world, and they're simultaneously doing that with you, you've automatically taken yourself into a more global position. Now, the reason that this is important is that this is the first time in history where the entire world is focused on one animal, the virus. This is the first time in history that all of society is now, we're all focused on in varying degrees by culture, by economic class, or whatever country or state. We're all responding differently. Sweden's responding one way, Nigeria's responding another way, we're responding another way. But this is the first time ever that we've been unified as a global community. And to me, that means amazing opportunities to do the 5 really well. And oh, by the way, just so you can count the numbers, the head has all 6 numbers in it. The chin is number 1, the mouth is number 2, the lip is number 3, the heart's number 4, the eyes are number 5, the forehead's number 6. Look what's at number 5, eyesight. Now, to me, that means theoretically, we do nature, family tree really well, and we do this together. We do it together in a composite. We may be able to numerically demonstrate a shift in eyesight numerically. And that would just demonstrate that global cooperation and personal responsibility has the opportunity to bring harmony and health in a greater degree than conflict. Can you get to it? Now, this is the first of many such things, because eventually this is all going to be in videos for you to consider. The minerals are in the middle. The plant kingdom is the second ring, and the last one is the animal kingdom, but it has blue, pink, and white on the outside. They're all held in the same rhythm. I'm going to suggest to you that the mineral kingdom is a specific thing that you can learn to do that's different than the plant kingdom. That's very different than the animal kingdom, because the animal kingdom can respond to you. If you have a dog, you know a dog can respond to you. They can like you more than some people. You know, I won't go into all the reasons why, but I'm going to do my best to stop killing things with the central nervous system. Why? Killing things in the with a central nervous system has a specific effect on the animal kingdom. In the long run, we'll all be wiser if sooner or later we look at the damage that we're causing to ourselves and to others, to the plant kingdom, to the animal kingdom, and so on, so we can gradually look at the reasons why we want to continue that. So that's what this picture is about. So we will have in the first program, we'll have a nearly weekly experience about what it feels like. And I will suggest, and we'll take you through the sequence, that there's between 4,000 and 6,000 different minerals that you might take into consideration. And why the difference is because they sometimes classify certain minerals like diamonds, rubies, and sapphires having the same molecular composition, but just having a different ion, that they're different minerals, but sometimes they're classified as the same mineral. So depending on who you talk to, there are 4,000 to 6,000 minerals. Now, the human body, to my knowledge, has nearly every one of them. Now, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, you know that there's 3 trillion trees, and they can't all be wrong, and numerous trillions of blades of grass and bushes. And there is a way for that to move, how it circulates. And the animal kingdom and the mineral kingdom, they are also connected. Most of you already know that all of the colors on Earth, including all those beautiful flowers and the fragrances that they emit, come from different minerals. So what's it like to be a mineral who travels for hundreds of millions of years from the middle of the earth that becomes eventually the color on a flower that becomes a fragrance that also emits? To me, that's a metaphor of human beings. We will take a long time going through a grinding process, but eventually we have a greater capacity to be like the colors of flowers and the fragrance they emit. I think that's our personal long-term destiny, is to be something like this. So that's why I'm providing these kinds of programs. Yes, I think there's. Yeah.
I just love this graphic. I think we should thank Ed Nelly for.
Yes, Ed Nelly, we thank you wherever you are on there. Now, eventually, we're going to give you a series of video clips that help you feel the mineral kingdom, and then the plants that are below the water and above the water, and in the land, in the desert, on the mountains, and there are all those different topographies in short clips, because each one of those different plants will correspond to a different location in your family tree, in your chakra system, and all the energy inside of you.
And then Danny, also, won't we be utilizing certain aspects of nature based on what we see in the iris, what the birth order is, because there's going to be certain visuals or certain key elements in the mineral, plant, and animal kingdom that would help.
Yes, absolutely, because one of the ones, for example, right up here at nearly 12 o'clock is the one girl symbology. Now, I know one girls have sometimes a difficulty with my say, hey, you're a matriarchal elephant. But they're
Optically, yes.
optically, yes. But if you look at some of the, we like to provide a list of really good research things about different elephants, by the way. My favorite one is called Echo the Elephant, but that's been around for 35 years. And they followed the life of one elephant who led her little family for 35 years through drought and in desert, and then this and that, and attacked by lions and crippled children and whatever else. I'm honoring that number one girls have a matriarchal ability. Then sometimes they slip into the ocean and, well, sorry, they're called whales. Is that another?
Another great analogy.
That's another, well, okay, so I'm saying that number one girls underwater are still matriarchs of the pod of orcas, right? And they do the same thing underwater as they do above the water.
But again, if we're trying to explain how we're utilizing nature to understand ourselves, when we look at and say, okay, that elephant is that birth order number one girl, it's about understanding actually our beautiful attributes and actually being able to see them in nature.
The
And
power that we have.
exactly, to see the
Yeah.
power
Yes.
that we
No,
have.
I got that part.
Yes.
It also will show us where, you know, there might be some challenges too, because if you look in the iris and you can see that there's certain areas where we've depleted ourselves, whether it's that 6 o'clock point or, you know, in my case, we talked about last time, the thyroid point, because I'm not speaking up, I'm actually being the elephant that's, you know, got too much on its back, then I can actually utilize that imagery of the elephant, but then also be able to utilize other images that would help me to express myself through my throat. So again, all of this information is right there in our family systems, in that family tree, in the birth order, and in the iris. And again, it's so complicated, it actually would take weeks and weeks of classes, which is what we are developing. But I'm trying to connect those dots of why are we looking at irises? Why are we looking at birth order? Why are we even talking about nature? It's because we want to be able to heal ourselves by recognizing who we are, what we're responsible for, and then give really simple, concrete ways to be able to undo those familial patterns and be able to live lives that are loving and of service to others.
And stop the cycle. moving
Exactly.
forward.
Stop those, you know, those circuits that he was talking about. I mean, these circuits are there for generations. And you think about, you know, how you might be treated by your mother, how you treat your mother, how you might treat your siblings, or even if you don't have children, how you treat other people. You know, it's like that circuitry is always there. And unless we're aware of it and noticing it, it's just going to keep running. So once we are aware of the kind of patterns that we're running, that's our access to change. Then we just notice. We notice those circuits. Oh, I sound like my mother. I'm doing this, and it's unloving. I can see it from my iris, from my birth order, from the patterns that I've created. Well, how can I make a shift?
And what I felt when you talked, you said 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 times, you need to, you know, feel and grow. And I'm like, yeah, I love the grow part, but that feel part is
Exactly.
oh,
Exactly. You have to
yes,
feel it,
feel
and that's
to
not how,
clear it up.
you know, we get busy. You know, I'm upset. Let me go do something. Oh, I'm upset. You know, let me change that feeling to anger. Then instead of feeling hurt and left out, I'm just going to get pissed
well,
off.
I go
or
to
I'm
the
gonna,
positive. So that
yeah,
was
or
another
you go
thing,
to
right?
like,
So
oh,
positive,
let's be
positive,
positive.
positive instead of feeling and clearing.
Exactly. So these are, you know, we're encompassing many, many different systems and many different belief patterns, and really coming up with systems that can work. Anyway, I will let you continue.
One more?
Yeah.
Thank you. Could you show me the next one before I, all right, one more. Go before, let's start there. To me, this is the greatest photographic reminder of the solution. I know that's odd, but I've had this picture for 20 some years. I keep it on my desktop just to remind me that the 2 forces there, the blade of grass, which by the way is a symbol of ascending innocence or softness, the dewdrop, and the 2 other parts with it, the 3 graces or 3 forms of feeling, and the perfect balance of the unity horizontally. This is the ideal feeling that theoretically opens the circuit of the very first gate to increase the capacity to feel. I know well enough that the feeling I need to feel, ideally, that will increase my capacity to feel, feels like this. So in common terms, the most common way that people describe this feeling would be humility. So I'm going to back up and go to the other one. Thank you. Let you off guard.
No, that one.
All right. Yes. To me, if I might define for a moment, perhaps the single most important definable feeling would be humility. Now, I'll have to define that because I don't like the dictionary definition, because that typically means yielding to a dominant force. Well, for me, the humility is the one feeling that you and I will eventually learn to do continuously forever. Why? Because the increase of the capacity to feel is what will be continually increasing as we experience and experience and experience and experience. The only thing that's going to be required of me is a sincere desire to feel more. Now, part of this feeling more starts with the circuitry I started at the beginning with. There is a circuitry at the bottom of the eye. The sincere desire to feel ideally would be directed with an intention to an exact other feeling. And that would be, start out would be open-mindedness, the willingness to consider, the willingness to explore, to examine, to use your intellect, your logic, and say, I'm willing to experiment with something, even if I don't fully believe it might happen. It might be possible for me to experiment with the increase of feeling. I'm suggesting that the increase of feeling alone is actually an experiment. I'm saying if you have a sincere desire to want to feel more, That's going to start the process. A sincere desire to want to know and discover more of the feelings inside of self. Now, you can add to this any form of idealism or any form of faith or any form of aspiration or any form of motivation or intention. What would be your reasons for wanting to grow? They can be anything you want them to be. If it's for your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, you want to start there, go for it. If it's for success or happiness or health, go for it. The sincere desire to know the truth about myself. I'm going to suggest that the original pristine soul, if I have a sincere desire to know my original pristine self, that is something I can aspire to feel. Now, there are several words down here, and the original word in this place is called inspiration, which is what breathing, by the way, is related to, is to inspire, to breathe. So the primary tip of the spear of all future experiences has to do with the use of inspiration transposed into aspiration. Inspiration can come from outside of you and will come, but aspiration only comes from inside of you, for you to sincerely inspire yourself by the desire to want to grow and feel more. Now, that can be the truth to discover every aspect of my soul or known and unknown to me. So do I sincerely want to know every feeling inside my soul, no matter where it came from? Now, for some of you, if I use the word soul, that automatically throws up a red flag about religion. What soul are you talking about? We're talking about karma. We're talking about this religion. We're talking about that. I don't believe that a soul exists. It doesn't require that anyone believe that a soul exists. You can have just simply an experiment of the desire to want to increase the truth about who you are. And then you come back later and you can change your motivation, you can change your intention anytime you want. Now, the moment you start to do that, you've actually produced a link between your present condition in the past and your desire to be something in the future. You want to, in the future, re-access your pristine soul and discover all of the attributes that you get to discover about yourself. That's all future-oriented. Now, here's the challenging part. The moment that you make that sincere desire to link truth to your own existence, and you do that with a choice, a free will choice to increase that feeling in the truth, there will come very quickly a cascade of little pieces of threads. Yes, I kind of measure the length of them at times. I measure things. And it's not big threads for most of the time. It's little pieces of threads start falling on you. What does it mean when these threads are falling on you? It means you pick up the phone, someone calls, and there's a little tiny trigger. The dog barks at the door, somebody goes by with a siren, you turn on the television, there's something else, your grandmother calls, your husband calls, or somebody else calls, and you're now getting a whole series of little threads of unresolved feelings. So what do you do at every single moment that these are coming to you? So if I go to the next one, it looks kind of like this. The ones from the past, they're basically locked into a pattern. That's good. The ones from the past are deeply locked into its own history. And the ones in the future are very, very thin lines. There's a very, very thin line that is the sincerity to feel the innocence of your own soul, like that drop of water on a blade of grass. So if I can go to me and feel that single drop of water, which is my own pristine innocence as a soul, and convert that into understanding clarity and understanding the truth about who I am, I'm on my way. Then automatically here comes a whole bunch of things. Now, that's a good thing, because as you're aspiring to feel more, you're actually setting in motion the resolution of things that were coming to hit you with a big club. So all of us have big hammers coming to us in the family tree, but the moment you aspire to feel the truth about your own self, the hammer starts breaking up into little threads, and they come to you in a series of little events, and another little event, and another little event, until all day long, you're processing feelings. Now, here's what I suggest you do. Do this rather than that. Got it? Okay, I'll try that again. Do this rather than that. To do that is, you're the reason why I'm triggered. You hit my car. You did this. Look at that president, that person, that bank, that government. Look at all this. Did you know what they're doing with vaccines? You don't know what they're. That's me transmitting something outward. I'm saying, when you're triggered, the sincere desire to feel every feeling like this I've ever denied. Oh, you want to trigger me about money? The sincere desire to feel every feeling like this I've ever denied. I really want to know the truth about the issues I have. The sincere desire about sex or relationships or mother or father or government or globe or animals or spirits, or the sincere desire at every single moment. The natural flow is outbound. I'm suggesting arch it back to your own self and down. If you trigger me, I'm going to accept the responsibility that you are triggering this feeling inside of me. I have to examine it. Now I have to also be willing to transparently and authentically identify the feeling I'm having. So if somebody's engaged in attacking me or someone else, and I say nothing, I become complicit in their way of hurting someone else. So sometimes it requires that I speak the truth about my observation of somebody else's treatment of someone else. Now, I can do that emotionally aggressive, or I can do it honestly. If I'm beating him over the head that you're being unkind to someone else, it's 3 hammers going off at once. We're all beating each other up. Or I can say, my observation is, in this moment, your way of treating the other person is unloving. To be honest about that. If I call them on it, they're no longer ignorant of their behavior. Ignorance doesn't, by the way, resolve them from it, but now it makes them more responsible in the future. So that's my way of seeing the two sides. So we're going to take you through this with nature. We'll come back and explain it again. We're going to take you through this with the iris, the birth order, and the family tree, and show you how to do it again. And we'll stay with you every part of the way. Now, the alchemical key to all of this, in my opinion, is time. All of these ancestral events are wrapped in circles of time. Now, if I utilize the seasons of the year, a cycle, the times of the day, if I were to stop for 5 seconds in an hour and have a sincere desire to feel the truth about my pristine soul, and then go about my work, and then I recognize it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half later, the sincere desire to know the truth about my pristine soul. If you do that for 30 days, your life is going to start changing. If you do that for 3 cycles of a month, you're now setting in motion a brand new circuit. So if you can say for a month, I sincerely want to know the truth about my own soul. And you do that for 3 months, it's locked in. Then another 3 months, it's locked in. Now, if you really want to get to somewhere very significant for the human being, 9 months, 9.5 months, will actually get you something very different. So if you want to say, hey, I sincerely want to know the truth about my soul with sincerity and purpose for 9 months, and you link that to the season of the year and the month that you're in, you're now going to use and mobilize the fulcrum of nature to bring yourself into greater harmony with the divine design for all creation. See, did I get anywhere? I'm saying if you want to, over a period of time, you can tune it off. I'm saying feel, feel, feel. Truth, truth, authenticity. Hour by hour, day by day. Do that over a period of time, it's a circuit. Add to that a season, and 2 seasons, and 3 seasons, and I can assure you 4 seasons of doing that is a life-changing experience. I've gone through it, I felt the results of myself. I'm now engaged in another set of 3 years because I did 3 years before I offered it to anyone else to notice what the effects were. And the only thing I can tell you is it just makes you more and more sensitive. Are you prepared to become more and more sensitive to the existence of the reality of your own soul? And by the way, for me, that doesn't make you more vulnerable because there is no such thing as being vulnerable.
But it is scary.
It is scary, it brings up, and if there's a fear that comes up, you process the fear. If it's a sadness that comes up, if there's a numbness that comes up, if you have a belly laugh and you're filled with joy, process that one too. Show me every feeling like this I've ever denied. And then eventually you want to find the truth about why you denied it. But then you might also discover, like some people do, that they use humor and laughter to avoid a feeling. Or they use food, they use something else, or activity, or dance, or sex, or music, or something else. So that's what the 4 programs are about. It's about how to be able to use nature, how to use the iris and birth order, how to use cycles and seasons, and how to be able to integrate that with other people in the world. You can participate at any level. You can ask, you can come back. My suggestion is to do it in groups with people around you, because doing it with people in your own neighborhood, to me, is a 3. Family is a 1, 2. Interfacing that with people that you know and you can talk to is a community. Community has a different effect. No, it's not really good enough, in my opinion, to do it just globally and do it cosmically. I would suggest it to do it with people that you can talk to and you can touch and you can be friends with.
So, and that's the plan really, is that we have these 4 programs, but we're going to be launching them probably, well, very soon. In the next, well, it'll start in September, but in the next couple of weeks, we'll post information on Rayid International. I'll also post it on Spirit Calling about how you can get involved in each one of these programs. Additionally, you will be training myself and our resident and other optometrists that are interested in iris, and anybody else that's interested in iris and birth order. So we'll be having ongoing classes, and that's going to take months really to learn all of this. So those will be weekly programs, and they'll all be recorded. So people will have the option to actually study and learn the specifics. Obviously, you can also do consultations where you just learn about these things yourself. But I think it's really going to be a pretty exciting time because we're going to be having all of these programs running, and you can really sign up or choose what level of involvement you want to get. The primary goal, though, is really to learn more about ourselves and then to be more responsible for our own actions, our own healing, if you will, because anything that's come down through our lineage and anything that's within society, you know, you can feel pretty powerless over it. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, that's my genetics, or this is what's happening. But if you can take personal responsibility and find clean ways to not react, but to respond, to align with nature, and to be able to shift how we're feeling, we're living in a different world. I mean, it's a much more beautiful place to live. So,
And we're also going to be having a high quality iris camera for you to have your own eyes photographed locally. And then we can put them on the big screen, put both of your eyes up, and we can all stand around and look at you.
yes, that's what
And the transparency of seeing, oh, by the way, mine were up there.
Yeah.
You know, I put mine up there, and I'll show you, I'll walk you through all the litany of pain. But if you want to be transparent about your own soul, then you just let people on in.
right. So anybody that wants to do that, we will, and that wants to actually participate in the video portion of it, where you actually can help teach others. That's the other thing that we're going to be doing, is taking photos, getting the birth order information, and literally doing consults live, and then either streaming them or having them available so that people that want to learn about themselves or be able to help their clients or patients can access that library.
Should we dare to open it up to some questions with 6
Sure.
months left?
Sure. Any questions?
Any of you out there want to ask a question? Feel free.
And
Other-
definitely thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And again, Adele, those are beautiful graphics. Thank you.
And we'll be back in approximately 2 weeks. We'll make an announcement and we'll have a different program. But between now and September, we're finalizing the materials for the journal, the month-to-month explanation of the times of day and the mineral kingdom and so on. We'll have a whole bunch of things just to give to you so that you can use it at your own pace.
And this coming Wednesday, I'll be outlining the iris part and developing that program as well for the future.
So if there are
Any
no-
questions? If not,
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
attendance and your patience.